I'm Rich Diviney, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Oscar Max and says, "Embrace the unknown, for it is in the unfamiliar that we find the most profound inspiration." Today is a special one, episode 250 of the Win the Day podcast. And to celebrate, I wanted to bring back one of our most iconic guests, Navy SEAL Commander Rich Diviney. Rich first joined us in episode 124, and clips from that conversation have been viewed millions of times. Since then, he's become a great friend and remains the best person I know on leadership and optimal performance. Through his 20-year career in the US Navy, Rich completed 13 deployments and held numerous leadership roles within the most elite SEAL teams. Now, with the release of his new book, Masters of Uncertainty, Rich is sharing these powerful lessons with the world. In this episode, we're going to talk about the secrets to elite performance in every domain, why you should embrace the traits that make you great, the best lessons from Rich's career as a Navy SEAL, and how to become a master of uncertainty. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life, so there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Rich Diviney. Rich, welcome back. Thanks for coming back on the show.
I tell you, 100 episodes since the last time, roughly.
Yes, exactly.
Seems like it doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess it is.
We'll,
right?
we won't wait another 100 to get you on again.
No, we won't. Right? Yeah. So we'll write something or have some sort of conversation that drives us to get back on together.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah,
We'll force you to get a new book out.
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah.
And speaking of, your new book is fantastic, Masters of Uncertainty. I know we're going to dive into that in detail throughout this episode. So to get everyone on the same page, what does it mean to be a master of uncertainty?
Yeah, Masters of Uncertainty, really, it means kind of what I define as true confidence. It's this idea that someone can look at life and understand that regardless of what happens, whatever the environment changes into or shifts to, chaotic, complex, anything, I know I can make it through. I know I'll figure it out along the way. And so I think the definition to masters of a master of uncertainty is someone who has those tools and techniques embodied in such a way that it becomes automatic. And automatic in the sense that not only is that person prepared to embrace the unknown when it hits them, unpredictably, but also deliberately steps into uncertainty, challenge, and stress outside of our comfort zone. We know all of our growth and evolution and discovery happens outside of our comfort zone. And the more we can deliberately step into it, the more we benefit from this great life we all have. So
you've worked with some of the most renowned companies on the planet. Can you give us an example of what a common scenario would be for someone to step into uncertainty, say in their career or in business?
Well, I mean, there's so many. So just take someone who's maybe changing careers, transitioning from one thing to another, whether it's military to civilian or someone's just making a transition or a job shift. That's a level of uncertainty that is quite common and rife, and we've seen in recent economic times. Companies moving into uncertainty. I mean, we see just the recent tariffs have thrown a lot of companies into uncertainty. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what to predict. We don't know how long it's going to be going. Any type of innovation or initiative can be examples of stepping into deliberately, companies taking deliberate steps into uncertainty. And oftentimes you'll find that the leadership of those companies, because they're aware of it, for them, it's a deliberate step. For the rest of the organization, it might be very non-deliberate, right? So everybody processes these things in a different way. But I think the neat thing about uncertainty is that it is ubiquitous. The only certainty in life is that we will face uncertainty at some point in our day or week or month or year. So
yeah, one of my favorite quotes of all time is "Change is inevitable except from a vending machine."
That's right.
I heard that about 20 years ago.
That is good.
Like,
yeah,
wow, that's a brilliant quote.
Yeah, that's good and true. Yeah,
yes,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, so.
Exactly. You've been intimately involved in Navy SEAL selection. What's the biggest mistake candidates make when they begin SEAL training?
Gosh, the biggest mistake I think beginning SEAL training is to think that or expect that they're not going to fail often and fail miserably. And I think this is where the people who don't make it, they present themselves rather quickly. Those folks and they may be top performers in other aspects of their lives or up until they got to SEAL training. But what SEAL training does is it puts you down to zero right away, immediately. And it says, okay, now that you have nothing, what do you have now? What can you do? And interesting thing, in when I was going through BUDS, which again, for the audience, you've had enough SEALs on here, so the audience probably knows, but basic underwater demolition / SEAL training. It's the 6-month course where regular Navy guys go to become SEALs. 90% attrition rate, roughly. And I remember being in BUDS, and there was an evolution called surf passage where you had to paddle your rubber boats up onto these rocks. It's actually rock portage. Surf passage is going on. Rock portage. I had to paddle and land your boat on these very jagged rocks, right outside the Hotel Del Coronado, by the way. That's why people at the Hotel Del will gather on the beach to watch this thing. Very tricky, very dangerous, and you have to do it the right way, and instructors are yelling at you the whole time. And I remember us doing this, and I was the boat crew leader because I was the officer, and we did it once. We did it poorly. We got yelled at. We went out, did it again, did it poorly, got yelled at. Did it a third time, did it poorly again. And it was actually, we were landing, it was a particular instructor that just was hammering us and me quite deliberately. And I remember after that third time, he relieved me as boat crew commander. He said, "You're not boat crew commander anymore. You're going to be just a paddle. You just do the paddling." And I remember after that, I was super depressed. I was like, I didn't know if I should be there. I was just kind of, moping a little bit. And I remember, it was after the evolution, I was sitting on some bleachers by myself, just feeling sorry for myself. And a buddy of mine walked up. He said, "Hey, Rich, what's wrong?" I said, "Well," and I told him the story. He was an officer as well. He said, "Rich, you got to understand, the ball's always bouncing, and sometimes it bounces on you. It just happens, right? Sometimes the instructors, it's inevitable that the instructor's going to have a day where they just pick on you. That's what's going to happen. So just get over it." And that lesson was pivotal. Now, I think I would have learned it anyway, but I learned it really very viscerally that day. And I think the mistake that a lot of guys make is that they don't think that's going to happen. They expect things to go their way. They expect to do well on the runs. They expect to do well on the swims. They expect to do this or that. It's just not going to happen. You're going to fail. You're going to feel like crap. You're going to feel miserable. You're going to be bottom of the class at some point. You're going to be the guy who's being picked on by the instructors. And once you get that into your thick skull, that this is what they're doing, is they're representing not only life but combat. The life in combat. You start to say, okay, all right, now I'm going to just charge forth. So
it's a great metaphor for life, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So we've heard a lot about these guys who would rock up to BUDS and they're absolute studs. Wouldn't they have had to have gone through a lot of failure to develop mastery in a specific domain like swimming or running, that they should be okay with failing when they're in that environment?
Yes. However, it's not just about failure. It's about uncertainty. And one of the things I will say and often say about athletics is that athletics aren't necessarily the best environment inside of which to explore uncertainty. In fact, most athletic endeavors are quite certain. Now, there are some exceptions. I would say all fighting sports are fairly uncertain. There are environments that add uncertainty in the equation, because you can train all day long. You can expect someone to do something, but when you're up against another human being in that endeavor, it's largely uncertain. So, and I would say sports, athletic sports, or endeavors that have to do with the environment, or the environment plays a big role, might be climbing or things like that. But other athletic endeavors are fairly certain environments. I mean, the football player, the basketball player, the tennis player, they go on that court and they have pretty much seen most of what you're going to see. And so there's a difference between the discipline of hard work and setting goals and achieving goals, and actually being able to make it through uncertainty, challenge, and stress. When the what is hitting the fan and everything's chaotic, where are you then? Part of that is the ability to understand that when I am at zero, I still got something. One of the things that you find, and there's been many examples where Division I athletes go to SEAL training and they quit the first day, first week. And I think one of the theories that we have is that these folks, at least in their cases, have developed this routine and habit. And first of all, they're highly disciplined. They're very hard workers. I'm not taking that away. But what they've developed is this idea that they are prepping themselves to perform at 100%. That's what you do in sports. You get yourself prepared so that when you're on the field, you are at 100%, or as close as you can get to 100%. Well, SEAL training takes that away immediately. I mean, you are immediately at 0%. What do you got now? And I think there are those who come from those genres who just aren't used to that, and they don't expect it. And so I think it's that uncertainty factor. It's not the failure factor as much as it is the uncertainty factor. Because once you have that and you add into it failure, now you're talking about a real stew of mental endurance that you have to really work through.
Yeah, the perfect storm.
Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of the parenting journey. It's like all of a sudden you've got 3 hours sleep, you've got important meetings, and if you've got, hired help to someone to help with the kids, if they are unable to make it, you've got to figure all that stuff out.
Yeah.
It forces you to be in that uncertainty.
The good news is there are specific things you can do. There's specific tools you can apply to this stuff, and in doing so, in any of these capacities, any of these environments, you can apply those and begin stepping your way through. I'm not saying it's going to be pretty. It's probably going to be quite ugly, but you're still making that step. You're still performing that way.
Can you give us, I think this might be good timing to maybe give us an example of what one of those tools might be. So someone has a busy day coming up. It's 8 a.m. They got a phone call that the person who's going to look after their kids can't make it. You've got a stacked day. How do they handle it from there when they can just feel their mind racing away with them and the stress really creeping in?
Yeah. So we'll talk about one of the most important tools, which is this idea of moving horizons. Moving horizons stems from this concept, or this actually the fact that our brains in any environment are trying to always figure out that environment. So our brains like certainty. As humans, we like certainty. So our brains are trying to make certain our environment at all times. And in doing so, our brains are looking to define three primary factors of our environment. One is duration, how long this is going to last. One is pathway, what's my route in, out, or through. And then one is outcome, what's the end state of all this. If we are in absence of one or more of those three factors, we find ourselves in uncertainty, challenge, and stress and anxiety and all that stuff. Our amygdala gets tickled, our autonomic arousal goes up. So I'll just give an example of illness, okay? Take strep throat. You and I we all know strep throat. Strep throat is a known illness. It has a known antibiotic, right? So if we get strep throat, if you and I both get strep throat, we are in absence of only one of the duration pathway outcome. In other words, we have the pathway, that's the antibiotic, and we have the outcome. We know we're going to get better. What we're in absence of is duration, because you may respond to antibiotics a little bit different than I do. So it might take you a day, it might take me 2 or 3 days, okay? But in essence, our anxiety, our uncertainty level is at a mild level. Now let's talk about the flu. Flu, also a known illness. We also know that most people, at least in today's society, do not die from the flu. However, there is no known medicine or antibiotic you can take for the flu. There's a lot of people who give you techniques and tips, but there's nothing you can take that will get rid of the flu. It's not definitive. We also don't know necessarily how long it's going to take to get over the flu. So in the case of the flu, now we're absent 2 of the 3. Okay, we know the outcome. That's the known thing. We know we're going to get better. We just don't know how long, and we don't know the pathway. And so our anxiety level, our uncertainty level is at a moderate level. Now let's just imagine that an illness shows up on the planet, and no one's seen it before. There's no known cure or virus. Some people are dying, some people are not dying. It's spreading around the globe, and we don't know how long we're going to be in it, okay? This is 2020 for all of us, right? In that case, we're absent duration, pathway, and outcome. Our anxiety, our stress level, our uncertainty level is high. So what moving horizons does is simply a technique that allows you to gain certainty in the moment of an uncertain environment. And you do so by basically picking something. Well, first of all, asking yourself in that moment, what do I know and what can I control? And picking something to focus on that provides you all 3 of those elements. Example would be this, in SEAL training, you spend hundreds of hours running around with big, heavy boats on your head, okay? And you do that all the time. In Hell Week, it's the whole week. You're running around with these things. I remember being in Hell Week, and it was 3 a.m. or something. We're running on the beach with these boats, and we're next to a sandberm, and we're all miserable. I know I was miserable. We've been doing it for what seemed like forever. And I remember saying to myself, okay, you know what? I'm just going to focus on getting to the end of this sandberm. And what I did in that moment, inadvertently, I didn't know I was doing, is I picked a horizon, and doing so, I created a duration pathway outcome. Duration from here to end of sandberm, or from now until end of sandberm, pathway from here to end of sandberm, and then outcome end of sandberm. And by doing that, I set a dopamine level in my system, which we'll talk about in a second, so that I could accomplish the goal. I could move towards that. And of course, in the accomplishment of that goal, I also gave myself a dopamine reward, which allowed me to then come back out, ask the question again, and pick a new horizon. And so moving horizons is simply this technique, this tool that you can use, and you can use it cyclically. You pick a horizon, you set your DPO, you execute the DPO, you register the reward, and pick a new horizon. And you can do that constantly. You can do that over and over and over again until one of 3 things happens. Either 1, you accomplish the overall goal. 2, you move through the stress, challenge, and uncertainty. Or 3, you generate enough certainty in your environment that you don't need to do it anymore. Okay, because sometimes in certain environments, as we step through, we're going to gain our optic of certainty is going to open up. But you can do this over and over again. And so in the case of getting up in the morning and, you have a ton of stuff on your plate, you have meetings that are impending, and your daycare falls through, and now you have this situation. The idea is, okay, what's the horizon I'm going to focus on? And in that case, it's great. What's the first thing I can do in the conduct of this environment or problem? It could be anything. I mean, it's really subjective to the individual. It could be, well, okay, let me call my mom. Okay, let me see if I can postpone some meetings, whatever that is. These horizons must be subjective to the individual, both subjective to the individual as a human, but also to the environment itself. In other words, the more intense the environment, often the shorter the horizon. Okay. In SEAL training, you're sitting in the surf zone for hours, so it seems like hours in surf torture, right? Freezing your butt off. It's one of the worst things. You get most quitters during surf torture, by the way. And I remember being in the surf zone and remembering and saying to myself, okay, I'm just going to count 5 waves. So in that moment, my horizon was 5 waves. Sometimes my horizon was, I'm going to make it to the next meal. Sometimes my horizon was, I'm going to make it to the end of the sand berm. Whatever that was, it was subjective for me and the intensity of the environment. And this is the first tool that we can start using in the conduct of moving through uncertainty, challenge, and stress. You're basically creating certainty by picking these DPOs.
For someone who's really feeling that anxiety, would you encourage them to train to go straight to DPO or to focus on something like breath first to be able to calm themselves down and then move to DPO?
Well, so that's an interesting question because even focusing on breath is in of itself a horizon. Your horizon could be, I'm going to take 10 breaths, right? But it's a great example. It's a great kind of tangent to go on, because when we think about uncertainty, or at least the uncertainty that bothers us, it's uncertainty that actually has the result of fear, okay? That fear is interlaced in. And so when we think about fear, what we have to understand is fear is a combination of a couple of different factors. This is the work that Andrew Huberman and I did early on when we were studying fear together. And in fact, a lot of the concepts of the book is stuff that we worked on together. But one of the things we discovered was that fear is simply a combination of 2 elements. Those elements are uncertainty plus anxiety, okay? In other words, you can have one of those elements and not the other, and you don't necessarily have fear. In other words, you can be anxious but not uncertain. That could be, I'm giving a presentation next week at work. I know the presentation, I know the people I'm giving it to, so there's no uncertainty there, but I'm a little anxious about doing it. There's no fear, it's just some anxiety. You can be uncertain without being anxious. Okay, well, that's every kid on Christmas Eve. Okay, we know there's no fear there. It's when we have those two things combined that we start to generate fear, and this is the uncertainty we're talking about. So in the context of your question, the way to mitigate that fear is to buy down either one or both of those factors. You buy down uncertainty, you buy down anxiety. Now, buying down uncertainty, the way you do that is you start picking horizons, okay? To buy down anxiety, you have to start taking charge of your physiology. In other words, when we begin to get anxious, our autonomic arousal goes up. Oftentimes, our amygdala gets tickled and we start entering that fight or flight. What's also happening is our frontal lobe, the decision-making part of our brain, it's starting to take a back seat to our limbic brain, our lizard brain. In other words, our limbic brain is starting to move forward. In the most extreme cases of amygdala hijack and autonomic overload, this is when our frontal lobe has taken a full back seat and now we're acting without thinking, okay? This comes in very handy for things like getting out of the way of a moving train or running from the bear. But for 99% of the things in our lives, it's actually better to have our frontal lobe engaged. All right, we know that when this happens, when our autonomic arousal goes up, there are certain physiological responses that our body engages in. One of these is our vision tunnels, okay? Our vision narrows. We get tunnel vision. We also know our respiratory system, our breathing increases. It gets more rapid and more short. We take shorter, more rapid breaths. We can manipulate our physiology by acting on those factors independently. So in other words, when we choose to stop and take 10 breaths, we are in fact manipulating our respiratory system and in fact reversing that autonomic arousal process. We're bringing our autonomic arousal down. In doing so, we're bringing our frontal lobe back online and able to make conscious decisions. So all this to say, to be able to effectively pick horizons, we're doing that with our frontal lobe, our conscious decision-making part of our brain. If we feel like we're in a moment where we're actually starting to, quote, freak out or panic, first thing we want to do is bring down our anxiety. And this is what we're talking about. Take 10 deep breaths. There's several different breathing techniques we could talk about. And I outlined some in the book and some visual ones too. But we're bringing down our autonomic arousal, bring our frontal lobe back online so that we can then engage in the process. But even saying I'm going to take 10 deep breaths, that's a horizon, and that's good enough.
Yeah, the power of breath to be able to calm you down, to be more present, just to, make such a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Breathing has absolutely changed my life.
Yeah.
Whether it's speaking on stage or anything, it's overwhelming.
It's directly linked to our vagus nerve. And so all of this is directly linked to our nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So it all makes sense that you can actually use your own physiology to manipulate that stuff in a positive way.
So if you're in Navy SEAL training and you see a bunch of guys there who you probably don't know very well at that point, maybe it's a couple of weeks in, you're just starting to get to know them, but you can see some other people who are struggling a little bit. Are you expending energy to try and help those people to be like, you know what, you've got this, you'll be okay? Or are you just selfishly focused on conserving your own energy and what you got to do?
It's a great question. I think most of us would say it's a little bit of both. In other words, you're not gonna let a guy flounder necessarily, especially if he's in your team, in your boat crew, and by him floundering is affecting the rest of the team. You'll likely try to do some encouragement there to get them, to get them going. However, there's a limit to it because you are so focused and expending so much energy on keeping yourself going that there's only so much energy you can do in helping another. And oh, by the way, most of us honestly believe that the process is the unconscious genius of it all, right? So someone who is struggling like that and can't get over it, they're probably in the wrong business, and their exit is probably exactly what we need. So I don't think there's from a student's perspective, I don't find there's a lot of people who actively look to deselect people. There's certainly probably some of those cases. The instructors do very deliberately, but they don't do it necessarily in a targeted way. In other words, I don't like that guy, I'm going to focus on him so he quits. They do it in a very strategic way. They're going to put pressure, they're going to push pressure points on people just to make sure that they have what it takes. Because, and in some cases, I talked to a buddy of mine the other day, Andy Stumpf, who was an instructor, BUD/S instructor, and he said, he figured this out when he was an instructor. He figured out this, he couldn't articulate the DPO process, but he figured out, man, if I even just screw with duration, I can screw with them. I can if I take away duration in their minds. In other words, we're doing these silly log PT exercises, and we say, and he says something like, what, this is going to be great. We're going to go till midnight on these things, something like that. See how people respond. And if people can't get into themselves and start doing this technique, then they'll quit. Most guys who quit when they started doing debriefs, and certainly the guys I've talked to, the very most common thing you'll hear is something along the lines of, we were doing this thing, and as I looked forward, I couldn't imagine doing it for that much longer. I.e., they were focused on the future. They were anxious about something that they couldn't control, and they were looking at the entire elephant instead of taking it one bite at a time. And I will say, anxiety, by the way, is the future, which means it's fiction. Okay, stress is the now. We know stress is happening now. Anxiety is all future. It's all fiction. Past is history, future is fiction. And so we don't want to focus on fiction. And one of the things you'll never see Navy SEALs do is worry about stuff they can't control. We plan, doesn't mean we don't plan for things, but in the moment, we're worried about the moment. We're not going to worry about something we can't control because that's fiction, that's anxiety, and that's very energy expensive, especially neurologically.
So your life depends on having that calmness and
yes, it really
that
does.
Perspective.
Yeah. Because again, if we worry about something that we can't control, we're wasting energy, and we're taking away capacity to worry about or to act in the now on something we can control. So it's a very interesting process that goes on and kind of forges this habitual system.
The instructors are so good at BUD/S on messing with all the guys, like you mentioned there. Are there any of the guys that were able to successfully game the system or a part of the training the other way?
So game the system, I'm not sure they could game it. I think there were guys who had a level, at least a small level of certainty about the system. In other words, they kind of understood the system to a degree that they could say, I know this is not going to last, or I kind of know what we're going to do next. Especially guys who'd been there. If a guy quits and he comes back, then they know a little bit more. It's not completely new to them. But again, I think the genius of BUD/S is that whether or not you're gaming the system, or whether or not you know the system, it's still gonna suck. You're going to really be in pain. It's going to be hard. You're going to be cold. Cold is the ultimate. Cold is the ultimate leveling factor for everybody, because I don't care how athletic you are, how super smart you are, whatever your talent or skill or thing is, cold is going to take you out of it. It's going to make you focus on the misery of cold. And that's why it's a huge factor. You and I were talking before. I mean, and we're here in Southern California. People don't realize how cold the water is here in Southern California. And most people quit SEAL training because of the cold. It's not because of the physical stuff. It's because of the cold. It's just, you can't get away from it. You can't escape it. It's very misery inducing.
We had a clip that went up from the very first episode you and I did together, and someone was talking about the example of like Wim Hof, or being like, look, you can actually manipulate your brain a little bit for the cold. And I was like, I don't think Rich is talking about doing a 3-minute cold plunge in your $2 million house. I think Rich is talking about 6 months of being cold and wet.
I'm talking about that cold that's seeping. It's bone chilling, and it's enduring. In other words, you don't know, and there's no relief. You don't know how long you're going to be at it. That type of cold is different. But again, I think even Wim Hof, and this is a great example, of breathing. Wim Hof, you can manipulate your breathing so that you increase your autonomic arousal, which is Wim Hof breathing. He basically pumps his physiology up, gets adrenalized and all that stuff. And it's, in essence, warms himself in certain ways. You can breathe in a way that decreases your autonomic arousal. In other words, you're calming yourself. And you can breathe in a way that keeps it quite steady, But yeah, I think anybody who knows Wim Hof breathing, they may be successful for certain aspects or at certain points, but that doesn't get you out of the, I'm going to be cold for 6 days and I'm not going to sleep. That's no breathing, no one breathing techniques gets you through that. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
Now, in your first book, The Attributes, you talk about all the different attributes for optimal performance. I think two of the most interesting ones to me were cunning and humor. I just think they're so interesting. So what would an example of cunning or humor be like in Navy SEAL training? And what is the line between that being a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, well, both are good. First of all the attributes, we talked about this last time. There's no judgment to any of the attributes. So even the ones that seem pejorative, like narcissism or cunning, they're the neutral. You look at them in a neutral aspect. The way we use cunning can be pejorative. Bernie Madoff used it for bad, and Oscar Schindler used it for good, right? So starting with cunning is simply at a neutral level, outside the box thinking. And the cunning mind will approach a problem and immediately ask 3 questions. The first question is, are there rules and boundaries? Second question is, are they real or are they perceived? And the third question is, if they are real, what happens if I break them? And the cunning mind will begin to look at ways outside of the problem to solve the problem. It's a very useful technique. It's very predominant in the SEAL teams. Most special operation soldiers have a lot of cunning. And so in SEAL training, you can use cunning for different aspects. One of the which if you think about this might be a little bit counterintuitive, but there were times where we'd be sitting and be freezing, and the instructors would pass around a hot soup. Okay, and some guys would pour the hot soup on their bodies just to warm up, it's like, why are you doing that? Because now you're going to be wet again, right? And so, so you're not thinking straight sometimes. But that's an example of maybe cunning gone wrong. But yeah, cunning is in SEAL training. Cunning is certainly not discouraged. Now cheating is discouraged in the context that if you are doing it for your own personal gain. Okay, well, people always go back and forth on the saying you hear about buds: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And all of us SEALs will say, listen, that is an appropriate rule if your cheating is in the context of getting the team better into a better position. If your cheating is in the context of if just serving you, that's where it's you're not doing it right. It's a no. It's bad. So I think the instructors will if they see cunning or even cheating used in a way that gets the team in a better position, they'll still punish you because that's their job, right? But they won't. Part of them will be like, okay, actually that was pretty smart, right? So I think that's where that happens, or that's advantageous. Humor is probably the most important one, and humor is really the ability to laugh when things are tough. You could be the class clown, which means you're making the jokes too, but it's really super important. One of the reasons why laughing is so important is because of the physiology, of the neurobiology that happens when we laugh. When we laugh, whether we like it or not, first of all, it's involuntary. It's like sneezing, okay? And whether we like it or not, we are juiced with 3 very powerful chemicals. First, we get dopamine. Obviously, we know about dopamine, the motivation chemical. Okay, it says, this is good, keep doing this. We get endorphins. Endorphins is, it basically masks our pain, okay? I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, neuroscientists were studying the brains of drug addicts, and they discovered that the human brain had opiate receptors. And they said, that's strange. Why the heck does the human brain have opiate receptors? Because we make our own opiates. Endorphins are what cause us to be the endurance creatures we are. We've heard of runner's high, for example, okay? Causes us to go the long haul for the food or shelter. So we get endorphins, and finally we get oxytocin. Oxytocin, known as the love hormone, it's in fact a neuromodulator. It affects both body and brain. But it bonds us and binds us together. You get huge amounts when you engage in physical contact with other humans. Actually, even animals we get oxytocin from. They get it from us. Acts of kindness and generosity induce oxytocin. So when we laugh, whether we like it or not, we get juice with all three of these. And so we can be in miserable environments and someone cracks a joke and suddenly we feel better. And the reason why we feel better is because we just got our body's telling, this is good, keep doing this. This doesn't feel that bad. We're in this together. Okay. It's why laughing, I've never, ever experienced a high performing team that doesn't have laughter as a part of it. Laughter is you ask any team guy, if they're not the team guy anymore, what they miss most about the teams, it's the laughing. It's the joking around, the absolute crazy humor that would emerge from some of the most ridiculously horrible environments. Oftentimes the humor was completely inappropriate, right? All of us would get canceled if it was heard by anybody.
So no great examples to share.
No great examples. Yeah, we're not going to get. I don't want to get canceled. I want to cancel you. But anybody who understands this concept, no matter who you are, understands that this type of humor is powerful. It also, by the way, is it's a hack, to so to speak, into getting over your fear. When we're afraid, when we get that amygdala starts getting tickled, when we have fear bubble up, we're presented with two choices. Okay, the choices are, we know them, fight or flight. Okay, now what neuroscientists discovered is there's specific switches in the brain that address each choice. So if you choose flight, that's a specific switch. If you choose fight, i.e., step into your fear, that's a specific switch. That fight switch is known as the courage switch. You're stepping into your fear. And what they've also discovered is when you step into your fear, you get a dopamine reward for that. Okay. It's actually nature's system of allowing human beings to be the discovery species that we are. In other words, that one thing, that one aspect of our physiology has allowed us to go from cave dweller to space explorer, because we get rewarded when we step outside of our comfort zone, when we step into our discomfort. But all this to say, we get that reward, that dopamine reward. So we also get dopamine when we laugh. Okay, so many of us may have had this experience where we're generally feeling fear, and someone makes us laugh, and suddenly our fear goes away for a moment, because we've just given ourselves the same reward that we would have had we stepped into our fear. So it's a hack into courage as well. So
yeah, you got a great story you share in the book about running up the hills, and then the instructor Goodman had said, right, now you got to do it to break a record, and you got to carry these heavy pallets. And you were the one that stood out of the group and said, no, that's actually not a good idea.
Yeah.
And the reward, so he was probably looking for someone to be able to stand up, but it sounds like you actually shifted the boundaries that were there in that situation.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I tell that story oftentimes, and I tell that story in the book too, about and that's just centered around this kind of building trust concept. In other words, that my actions that day helped build trust over a long period of time. However, I would say that level of impetus on my part wasn't planned, by the way, but it allowed for a display of courage, which then allowed the instructors to look at me as someone, oh, wait, this is a guy who would actually step out for his men at risk to himself. And anybody who does that, anybody who sets that example, which many guys do in different contexts, that's someone you want on the team. And so I think that's why it was very positive at the end of the day. And I think that's why, Instructor Goodman was his name. He would say, it was funny because I always joke he was not a good man, but he was a good man. He was just playing a role. He was a great guy. But people say, hey, was that planned, or what was the response? And I remember after that, the instructors, now it was towards the end of training anyway, but they looked at me a little bit differently. And I think because most of the SEAL instructors are enlisted guys, and so they're putting officers through this pipeline with the expectation that they may go back to a platoon and have this guy in charge of them. So they want to make sure that they're solid guys. And so I think in this context, they were able to see, oh wait, this is a guy who'll actually put his neck out on the line for people. And while I'd like to say it was pre-planned on my part, I think it was largely in frustration, but I meant it when I did it. It was interesting. So, yeah.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential?
It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. Do you remember how you felt the first time you were exposed to the SEAL Team 6 guys and seeing them in action?
Yes. In that environment, I felt at that moment what I felt several times previously in my career as a Navy SEAL. And it's what I call healthy imposter syndrome. Because even after finishing BUDS, I mean, my BUDS class, we started with like 180 people. We graduated 38. Those are normal numbers, right? But I remember graduating and looking around and saying, how am I still here? These people, I mean, they're just phenomenal human beings. And I felt that periodically through my career. And the reason why I call and certainly when I first got to that command, but the reason why I call it healthy imposter syndrome is because it caused me to want to be better, want to do better, do the right thing, and live up to what I felt these guys were for me. What's ironic and kind of funny is that when I talked to my teammates about that, they all felt the same thing. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I need to live up to the team," and that really helps very good teaming. But yeah, going through that and starting to be a part of this very specialized organization, not better, not worse, but very specialized command allowed me that feeling again. It's like, oh, wait a second, why am I still here? What the heck? I mean,
must be something wrong with the system.
I tell you, I mean, I have to really step it up because I don't know, I don't know if I really do have what it takes, but again, not in a healthy way, in a way that pushed me, not in a self-deprecating or certainly one that affected my self-esteem or insecurities, but it was a way that really allowed me to step up my game. Yeah.
How coachable are those guys at that level?
I mean, extremely coachable. I mean, again, I would almost say coachable is it's too light of a term. We at that level, I would say all SEALs are like this. Certainly it might get even higher at that level, but we're all so dialed into our environment and what we're doing that our feedback loop is instantaneous. In other words, if we do something wrong or if we make a mistake, we either hear about it immediately through either the person who it affected or the environment, or we sense it in ourselves and are immediately adjusting. Our adjustments are immediate. Now that comes quite naturally when you put yourself in these environments. I mean, and just the environment alone. I mean, the Navy SEAL world, I mean, everything about the environment is looking to kill you. The ocean, if you turn your back on it, will kill you. If you're jumping out of an airplane at 20,000 feet and you do the wrong thing, it will kill you. Whatever environment we choose, that environment is looking to kill us. And that creates a humility that is predominant. In other words, you are very respectful of the environment, but you're also understanding when that environment gives you a cue that you just screwed up, you immediately notice it and you immediately adjust. And so it's almost like the coaching is so instantaneous and so constant that you're constantly in that feedback loop for yourself, for others, and you're learning and growing the whole time. So it's a really, really cool environment to be in. I'm not sure I will ever experience an environment like that again. Nor do I have to, I guess. I mean, we made age out of that stuff, but it was remarkable.
In the New England Patriots NFL team, they talk about Tom Brady being so intense in the locker room, so intense on the field, just intense all of the time. There's always a way to get better. And there are other people like Rob Gronkowski, the tight end, who was the party guy. He was the one who was saying, relax, Tom.
Yeah.
What was the environment like relative to those two people? Did you have a mixture of like some of the people who were the jokesters and more lighthearted as well as some super intense people?
The intense people were the exception, not the rule. We had some intense people, but they weren't even the intense. So Jocko's a great example. Jocko's a friend. Jocko comes across as this very intense guy, and I would imagine that when you put him next to most SEALs, he would be more intense or come across as more intense. But he's also very, very humorous. I mean, he jokes the same way we do. I mean, but every other SEAL does. So I think I don't think the super intense guys can make it through BUDS. You just can't. You cannot maintain that level of seriousness for that duration in that type of misery and still make it through. You have to relax. You have to let it happen. You have to let it be. And I think part of that is indicative of just the training they ask you to do. And, we do something called drown proofing in SEAL training, and where they basically tie your hands behind your back. So you tie up your hands and they tie your feet, and then they throw you in the pool. And you have to basically bob. The pool is about 15 or 20 feet deep, and you have to bob there for 30 minutes. Okay. By bobbing, you mean you can either tire yourself out by trying to kind of move your legs, which is really kind of akin to panicking, because you're going to tire out. You're not going to make it 30 minutes. Or you completely relax yourself. As soon as you relax yourself and, for example, you blow out all the air, what happens? You sink. And you sink to the bottom. And as soon as you get to the bottom, you basically kick off the bottom and kick yourself up to the surface again. You take another deep breath, and then you sink again. And so all drown proofing is just a very calm, relaxed, I'm going to go up, I'm going to take a breath, I'm going to sink down, I'm going to blow the breath out, and I'm going to kick off. And as soon as you understand that rhythm, drown proofing becomes super easy, And then, of course, they add to that twist, because after you do it for 30 minutes, they basically drop a mask at the bottom. You have to pick up the mask with your teeth, go up, and then you have to swim 50 meters, that way, with your hands and feet tied too. But that all still is incumbent on you kind of relaxing. And so I think this level of training, it eliminates those people who take things too seriously, who can't kind of relax in the moment and kind of say, okay, I'm just going to let it play out. I'm just going to to some degree, I'm not in control. So if I can't control it, then I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to control what I can control. And so I think this might be one of the reasons why maybe some super intense athletes don't make it through, because they approach the environment too intensely, and they can't lighten up. You have to lighten up. Things are going to get bad. You're going to feel horrible. The shit's going to hit the fan. Everything's going to be, it's just going to be miserable. And you have to be able to say, all right, fine. We'll just let's crack a joke. That's the time to do it. So maybe that's it. So yeah, the answer to your question is I didn't find that there were guys who were a little bit more intense than others. Holistically, even the intense guys knew when to relax and let loose and just kind of let it happen. Crack a joke.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say to the guys before an operation? Was that the time to sort of have short-term focus and intensity, or is that where you're also trying to keep it sort of relaxed?
What's funny is I didn't have to say anything. All the guys knew what they needed to do before an operation. I think, and I think this is the gift I had as a leader in the SEAL teams. Is my biggest job as a leader in the SEAL teams was reining guys in, not motivating guys, not telling guys what to do. Was really making sure that they understood what had to go on, because they're going to move, they're going to make shit happen. What I have to be able to do is say, okay, I understand what has to happen, and I understand what needs to happen and when. So if I see someone kind of starting to run outside the lane a little bit too far, that's going to be detrimental, then just reel that in a little bit. In
terms of like enthusiasm?
Enthusiasm or just speed of action, right? Because again, guys are decision makers. Now, the other thing is most guys, they had a very clear understanding of their actions and how it would affect the team. So even those types of decisions, I didn't have to worry about too much. It was more that, as an officer, your job is to keep appraised of the entire environment, the strategic picture. And so what's more often the case is I'm looking at the strategic picture. The guys don't have to. They're worried about what, the now, the here and now. Something in the strategic picture changes that's going to affect the way we have to behave. That's when I have to be very deliberate about communicating that. So that's where someone might maybe not rein in, but certainly alter course. So yeah, everybody before missions knew exactly what they needed to do, where they needed to be. There's always joking, but there was seriousness in our planning. There was seriousness in our briefing. Again, that's the humility part. We're marching into the unknown. Every mission was the unknown. Yeah, we had a plan, we had a target, but you don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. So there's a seriousness and an intensity in that vein. But again, even that, I'm all for planning, but when it comes to uncertainty, you can't have paralysis through analysis. So you plan the one or two things that you can anticipate. So it might happen. Hey, this might happen. And after that, you're like, hey, whatever happens, we'll figure it out along the way.
And how do you avoid complacency creeping in from such a high-performing team?
I think complacency starts to creep in when humility starts to creep out, and so I think that happened very rarely because of the intensity of the environment. Every guy knew that, hey, if I get complacent, I could get myself killed, or worse, get one of my teammates killed. So I did not see a lot of it. I think the where we had to be careful was when things got very rapid in terms of maybe a mission, we'll call it a TST, time sensitive target, would pop up, and we have to go in 30 minutes. Okay, now you're truncating the entire planning process. You're going to be going a lot on what the standard operating procedure, what you did last time, what you usually do. And I think that's where you have to be very cognizant of making sure you're at least pinging on the most important things that people have to consider. And again, that might be my job in terms of strategic picture. The breacher might be like, hey, okay, we're going this. I got the breach, but just everybody remember this and this. Okay. The sniper might do the same thing, the assaulter. So I think everybody's dialed into understanding that even in those very fast moving moments, you have to make sure you're looking at those little things. I think complacency also, it might also occur for people who just get very comfortable doing some of the stuff, like guys who really love skydiving. They may, I mean, they love every part. They do thousands of jumps. They may say one day, I might not, do 2 jump master checks when you're supposed to get 2, and that's where everybody has to police themselves, and in that environment, high performing team environment, everybody is expected to police themselves. You're not expected to, micromanagement. There's no time for micromanagement. So the expectation is that you police yourself, and in doing so, you are taking care of yourself. You're literally, saving your own life or saving the life of those around you. So there's motivation there.
So there's little micro checklists that you'd have mentally just for so many little things that are still routine.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure you get them done.
Get them done. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And this is something I wanted to ask you during our last episode together, this idea of the mind gym that you created. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the mind gym was, when I took over training, one of the things that we were looking at was resilience in terms of how guys were, we'd been at war for over 10 years at that point. There were guys who were coming back. They were broken, both mentally and physically. In addition to that, how could guys do better? Like, how could we perform better? And I and a few others believed that it wasn't about benching more weight or running the mile any faster. Physically, we were fine. Our next leap in performance was going to be from mental aspect. How could we train our brains in ways that allowed us to perform better? So the Mind Gym was really just an experiment in getting a bunch of resources together that could help guys develop a better working relationship with their brain. Some of it was understanding HRV breathing, for example, and how our parasympathetic and sympathetic systems work when it comes to our physiology. Some of it was the float tanks in terms of getting some resilience and relaxation. Some of it was mental acuity drills and things like that. So we were just throwing a bunch of things against the wall to see what stuck. And then the other collateral goal for that initiative was to help guys if they in fact were suffering from any PTSD or traumatic injury that they weren't necessarily seeing. And the theory behind that, at least mine, which my leadership fortunately, or some of my leadership fortunately agreed with, was SEALs, most Type A endeavors actually aren't the first people to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'm sick" or "I'm broken." Okay, because you're afraid you're going to get pulled off the line. So we're very mute about what we perceive to be weakness, So if our elbow is hurting, we're not going to say anything because if it takes me off the mission, I'm going to be pissed. So when I was working on the Mind Gym stuff, I was recalling several years prior, one of our really fantastic leaders had looked at how SEALs were working out and realized that SEALs were, over the course of a career, really breaking themselves physically. One of the reasons was because we were working out in insane ways. The SEAL workout was like, hey, do as much as you possibly can, as hard as you possibly can, and that's the workout. So let's do 1,000 flutter kicks. How about that? Well, so and you just do it, right? So and we realized that's not the right way to work out. This leader said, you know what, I'm going to start bringing in some functional fitness. Started looking at sports teams and things like that. How can we bring in a level or a way of working out that allows for guys to have longevity and strength and endurance? And so what he did very brilliantly is he knew he couldn't change. To change a SEAL's workout back then is sacrosanct. You're not supposed to touch it. So what he did is he brought in some of these coaches and then got some really kind of responsible and very well-renowned team guys who were just in the teams, got them involved, made them believers, kind of early adopters, and then just said, hey, just go to the gyms and start working out this way, And so they're working out this way, and then guys are looking at what they're doing, and then they're saying, oh, wait, what are you doing? And they're modeling. one of the benefits of this now was that now guys were starting to work out in a way that allowed them a relationship with, say, a physical trainer or something, so that the physical trainer could be working with them, for example, and say, you know what, I'm noticing that you are, when you do this shoulder exercise or whatever, your left shoulder is not carrying as much weight as your right shoulder. There may be something wrong there that you need to get looked at. And so now this guy is voluntarily going to the physical therapist to fix his shoulder, rather than guys saying, "Oh, something's wrong with my shoulder," right? So the injuries or the detriments are being pointed out in terms of getting better versus being worse. I felt we could do that the same way mentally. So in other words, if we could have guys begin to develop working relationships with their brain and maybe be working with a, for example, mental performance coach, in the conduct of that work, the mental performance coach could say, you know what, I'm seeing there's something here that's preventing you from taking this next leap. There's something in there. You may want to go, why don't you go see the psychologist and see if you can work that, get that figured out. Now you got a guy volunteering to go to the psychologist to work stuff out, right? Whole different aspect, because the idea is if you put a sign help, over the door, no one's going to lie. The SEALs are going to run the other direction. If you put a sign increased enhanced performance, the guys or new gear, you're going to see a line around the corner, right? So the idea was to shift the paradigm a little bit to help guys start to notice this. Now, I don't know if we, again, when you're in charge of something like that, you're only in charge for 2 years at the most. I think for me, it was like 18 or 19 months before I was moved on to another job in normal career progression. So ultimately, I don't know where they got in that particular endeavor. I would hope that they've gone to new levels. I'm not sure if they have, but that was the original idea.
I love it. If someone was dealing with loss or something in their personal life, or dealing with injury, or coming up to retirement, would you notice that in that group? And if so, what would you do to handle it to make sure they got their head back on straight?
Yeah, sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't. I mean, the advantage to compartmentalization and the ability to compartmentalize is you can shift horizons quite rapidly and quite deftly. The disadvantage is you can put things away and you can hide things quite deftly as well. So guys were usually quite reserved and quiet about that. They wouldn't bring it up. So I can't say that I saw that very often. It may have been occurring. If on occasion I had guys come and say, "Hey, boss, I'm having this problem," I would always over-index. I would try to do as much as I possibly could to help them with that. And then, of course, the command started understanding that family was important in this process. When I first got to the SEALs and certainly the specialized commands, the level of family involvement was nil. In fact, the families weren't even allowed on the compound. So I remember they'd have to drop us off if we were going to get deployed. The command and the NSW community as a whole, to their credit, realized the fault in this error and began to really bringing the families in with family events and things like that, and including the family, because they recognize, hey, the most dangerous detriment to an operator overseas has nothing to do with physical or being shot or anything like that. It has to do with family. If someone's family is suffering or not doing well, that operator is going to be mission combat ineffective, just from a mental standpoint. So to be able to take care of the home front and understand that things were fine, that was a big deal. And so the community's done a great job. I think the military holistically has done a great job doing that. So
yeah, more integration rather than siloed. Yeah. When you were officer in charge of selection, assessment, and training, was there an example of a bold action from a candidate that you saw that instantly made you realize, hey, this is the person that I want?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I don't know if I can highlight a specific example, because I just, my memory's not that good. However, there were times where I would see someone make a decision quite quickly. I was like, man, that was a great decision. That was really innovative or creative or just adaptive in a way that was very impressive. The way guys would ask questions would always, if they were spot on, the way guys would interrogate each other in a responsible way, that would always be a green flag. And so I was fortunate to experience more than not looking at guys coming up after me and saying, man, these guys are so much better than I am. and I get excited about it because I knew that they were going to take the command to a whole new level. So I think that was a real kick in being part of the training process.
Now let's switch gears and talk a bit more about your book specifically. Who do you want someone to be once they've finished reading it?
I want somebody to come away from reading that with confidence. And like I said at the beginning, confidence, I think true confidence is the ability to know that as I move through life, regardless of what happens, I will figure it out along the way, So that the one aspect is this idea that, understanding and practicing these tools can allow you to do better when uncertainty, challenge, and stress strikes without warning. Okay. And that's a really good tool. That's a really good capability to have, and something that allows true confidence. However, the next and probably more important thing that I'm really driven by and interested in is those folks who practice this stuff and get really good at make it habitual, like masters of uncertainty are. They're the folks who deliberately step outside their comfort zone. They choose to step into uncertainty, and this is, again, like what I said, this is where growth occurs. This is where discovery occurs. This is where we start to explore our potential. And so I think I would hope that someone reads this. And yes, cool, I can now do better. But now I'm getting to the point where I can just now choose things. I can choose a pivot that I've been putting off. I can choose an activity or endeavor that I've been putting off because there's fear there or there's uncertainty there. Well, now you know what you can do to go through it. And it opens up a whole aspect of your life and exploring your potential that I think is remarkable.
What do you feel like stopping most people from living their potential?
Fear.
Yeah,
fear. I think it's that simple. So,
I feel like a lot of people are so worried about going from 0 to 100, but if they follow your book, they can learn how to go from 0 to 1, then 1 to 5, and 5 to 10.
Yes.
And once they do that, they can just carry the momentum and get to where they want to be.
That's right. I mean, it's the neurological equivalent of eating the elephant one bite at a time. But part of the book talks about, okay, let's identify what the elephant is. That's important. Mm-hmm. And let's understand what we're bringing into that endeavor personally, attributes, identity, things like that. And then let's apply the tools so that as we move through it, we start figuring it out along the way. And understanding that we should be resolute in the outcome, but flexible in the approach, because things are just not going to go as you plan them to go. The perfect analogy is the rock climber who looks at the side of the cliff, and as that climber's looking, says, okay, I'm going to go, I can map out a plan. I think I'm going to do this, right? But that rock climber knows that nothing's going to happen, and they're not going to really figure it out until they get on the rock and start climbing. And as they're climbing, inevitably, they're going to hit a point where what they plan to do, they can't do. And they're going to okay, that's not the right thing. And they're going to have to look for the next best foothold or handhold. And sometimes the next best foothold or handhold is actually down and to the right, which means they're going to be moving away from their goal to get to the next better position. So sometimes in the conduct of these things, it might feel like we're moving away from our goal, but all we're doing is we're getting a next best foothold and handhold. You can only do that if you're focusing on horizon after horizon. Because if you are focusing on too much on the whole thing and you feel yourself moving away, that's going to feel disruptive. That's going to feel debilitating, and morale will waver in that case. So I think that's important.
So moving away from fear, moving more into confidence, and I guess it incorporates optimism, right? That there is something brighter ahead, no matter what you're going through. Maybe there's a relationship breakdown, maybe you lost your job, maybe there are times of economic uncertainty, things at very much a macro level, but just having faith and having a bit of optimism that there are some great things around the corner. And in fact, there are many cases for every single person where going through a significant problem or challenge created space for them to meet their eventual life partner, their soulmate, or something like that.
Well, I think it's part of that is reframing this whole idea, first on fear, but also on the idea of ups and downs. We all know, like, life is a roller coaster. It's a series of ups and downs, just like a roller coaster. Now, how many of us, and I don't necessarily like roller coasters, but how many of us would like a roller coaster, those of us who like them, that just goes flat, or just goes up the whole time, right? No one, because that's not the juice of the roller coaster. It has loops and curves and ups and downs. And that's the same thing with life. And so we have to reframe our ups and downs in the sense that this is what provides us the spice of life. Those ups feel even better because of the lows, because of the stuff we've had to do to get there. Any of us who love Christmas as a favorite holiday would say, I love Christmas, but we wouldn't want Christmas all year long. We get sick of Christmas, So that's one thing, is reframing what the ups and downs of life bring us. And then also reframing fear. Fear is nature's risk assessment tool. In other words, one of the terms I hate the most is fearlessness, or being fearless. And in fact, one of my favorite commanding officers when I was a young officer said, "Hey, Rich, beware the fearless leader, okay? Because that guy's going to get you killed. Because fear is a risk assessment tool. And if we're not listening to our fear, we're not assessing risk appropriately. Sometimes it is the right decision to flee, to run away. If you're not looking at it that way, you're going to A, maybe get yourself in trouble, or B, just not recognize, you get panicked or disabled by fear. But rest assured, don't let fear disappear. Use it to our advantage. Use it because it gets our senses alerted, gets us in a state where we actually are ready to act. Just don't let it debilitate you, and you can move through it in a very effective way. And if you feel yourself getting fearless, stand by, because that's complacency, basically.
Yeah, honing your intuition to use fear to your advantage.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the signal I'm supposed to be picking up on? How is that guiding my action?
Yes.
How is that calling me to a bigger game?
Yep. Yeah, there's a great book out there written, I can't remember, years ago, called The Gift of Fear. Really phenomenal book. The author talks about the benefits of fear in our life and how it's saved so many people because you listen to that intuition. We can't let it debilitate us. So it's a balance.
If you've got a friend of yours who's in a rut, what do you do to motivate them?
Listen. Yeah, first you listen. I think most people who are in ruts, they want to be heard. And just the act of being able to talk to somebody about what they're feeling allows them to get it off their chest, but also in many cases start to reframe it themselves. So I think listening is what I've learned to be the most effective tool. And truly listening. It's not really, a lot of times when we listen, we're thinking either what am I going to say next, or what is this person, or what this person is saying, how does that apply to my life? Both cases, while not malicious, is turning all the attention and focus back to us. True empathetic listening is I'm hanging on every single word this person is saying, and if something comes into my brain, I'm wiping it away, and I'm really engaged, both physically and mentally, in what this person is saying. And so I think listen first, and then figure it out from there.
Love it. Self-efficacy is such a big part of your work. How does self-efficacy change when it's an individual versus being part of a high-performing team?
Well, it changes in the sense, so self-efficacy also an attribute, and the attribute defined as it's the combination of confidence, I know I can do this, the initiative to get started, and then the optimism that as I move through, I'll figure it along the way. So it's kind of this self-starter attribute. I think individual self-efficacy, you see, that's the people you see who are they're self-starters. They don't need to be told. They're just going to go, right? They understand, and they'll just start moving. They'll try. Really great attribute to have. I think we as teams have access to more self-efficacy individually, because if we have teammates that are there to support us, then our self-efficacy can actually be brought up by a team. So individual self-efficacy can be affected by appropriate and high-performing teaming.
And along those lines as well, how do the right attributes accelerate skill development? Like having a team who have the right attributes accelerate skill development.
Well, the way they do is because if we're entering into a team with the right qualities, we are now a culture fit, and everything's clicking in that team. And one of the ideas is every team has its own unique set of attributes that make define high performance on that team. So the attributes required to be a great SEAL team looks different than the list of attributes required to be a great surgical team or sales team or vice versa, or teaching team. Understanding that list and having attributes that are congruent to that team allows for a culture fit. And when you have a culture fit, man, I mean that's when things just really take off, because you feel valued, you feel like you fit. You are literally the Jeep on the Jeep track, or the Ferrari on the Ferrari track. And it allows you to really accelerate your skills in almost every way.
How do you personally handle a creative block? Say if you're like, look, I've got this creative project, and you feel like you're struggling a little bit, or maybe if it's a preparation before you're about to embark on a creative project, how do you just handle that from a mindset perspective?
Yeah, for me, I sometimes I just walk away for a moment. I take my mind off of it because oftentimes that break can just give you a mental thing. Or I can also sometimes DPO or shift horizons. I can say, okay, let me pick something to move towards, and then see if that sparks. Interesting enough, even writing books for me, creativity and innovativeness are both attributes on our list of 41. Both actually different. Creativity is this ability to create something or bring something into existence that was otherwise not in existence. Innovativeness is this ability to take something in existence and make it better. You can have someone who's high creativity, low innovativeness. That's most artists, by the way. They're like, I don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me to make this better. Just give me the lump of clay or the blank canvas. You can have people who are higher on innovativeness than creativity. That's me, actually. And so what that meant for me was that creative part of putting something on the page right off the bat, it's always the hardest part for me. But once I have something written, the editing is where the magic happens. And so one of my strategies in writing, at least, was just start writing. I just start thinking of a story and just start writing something just to get something on the page, because that process would click me into my innovativeness and allow me to start editing in a proper way. So in that case, that's one of the ways I dealt with creative blocks.
Yeah, the hard work's just getting to the computer, isn't it? You have those that resistance just to sitting down. Once you do, I'm exactly the same, where inevitably I look back at it and the things I've written down I'm actually quite happy with.
Yes, yeah.
It's just like at the time you can be quite frustrated, feel like you're not making progress, but in retrospect you're like, wow, that was very necessary.
Yeah, and that can, like I said, that can even be DPO'd or Horizon. For me, anytime I'm getting ready to start writing something, I start with an outline. Okay, what are the topics I want to cover? And it might be like 3 things. And I say, okay, let me break these 3 things into smaller things and see if I can do that. And then, okay, now this small thing, what can I write about this small thing? And maybe start there. And so even that can be DPO'd in a meaningful way.
I'm loving all the family content you and Kristen are putting out there on social media.
Yeah.
It's so nice. Obviously, the attributes and all the stuff you talk about is incredible, but it's nice to see the sort of family behind the man and just all of the real world scenarios. It's so relatable.
Yeah.
How has your feeling and sort of definition of marriage evolved over the years?
Yeah, well, I'll say the family is the man. That's who I am. My primary identity is husband and father. Marriage for us has evolved in the sense that we understand that marriage is an evolution itself, right? When you meet somebody and you decide to spend your life with that person, one of the first things you need to recognize is you are going to change and that person's going to change. And I think the conduct of that change and the exploration of that change together is one of the spices of a great relationship. I always get very confused, in some cases upset when I hear people who are getting divorced saying, well, that person's not the same person I married 10 years ago, right? No shit, right? I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago either. I mean, you have to evolve, you have to change. And I think part of that is the ability to understand and enjoy that and have mutual respect for each other. You come into relationships listening to each other. You come into relationships honoring each other's uniqueness. I think anybody who can say, you know what, all of the quirks that typically annoy me about this person, I actually really love, right? That's a really cool thing too. There's just those little things you love because you have a great marriage too, that the physicality of a relationship. I don't believe in love at first sight. I don't think love is a visual thing. I think love happens when 2 people are together and you start really interacting. You can certainly have attraction, from the physical part of it, but love really starts to form when you are with that human being and you become, really soulmates. You start to really understand each other at a soul level. When I look at my wife, of course, I still I see a beautiful woman, but we see each other so much more deeply than that, So yeah, I read a book. I can't remember the name of it, but it's really about this age. It's about how we age and kind of the way we view and perceive our life. But one of the lines that struck me is when the guy said, when we're with people we love, the person we love looks in the mirror and sees everything that's changed. But when we look at that person, we see everything that's the same, that stayed. And that's the real thing. I mean, when we look at the people we love, we see everything about them, their essence. We don't notice the changes as much, right? We notice the changes ourselves because that's what we do. But I think marriage is work. Marriage is work. Marriage is time. It's effort. It's respect. It's listening. It's changing. It's effectively arguing. And because again, if you're not arguing effectively, that's a killer of all relationships. Any marriage that they don't argue, stand by. That's not, but it's not only arguing, but are you effectively resolving those arguments, those disagreements as well? I think that's part of it. So again, I don't say, I would never say that I have the solution. So far, Kristen and I are doing great. We're going to continue to work on it, and we'll get some things wrong, get some things right, probably more right than wrong. Hopefully, at least that's our track record. But it's a great feeling.
We've had marriage therapists on the show, and I feel like you've just given the best definition of what relationship success looks like.
Yeah, it's funny. Let me give you another one. I'm going to throw this at you because Kristen and I have been talking about this for a while. It's something I thought of years ago. And it's kind of it has to do. So again, this is my bullshit opinion. This is not anybody can say you're full of shit, whatever. But the theory is this, okay, that we as men and women come into relationships with the need for three polarities that we want to, kind of three roles that we want to play. For a woman, the three roles are princess, porn star, president. Okay, one of those, and the idea is every woman has a different percentage that they play. Some women they're more, so princess is want to be doted upon and taken care of. President is I want to be in charge, I want to have agency, and then porn star is just I want to just be ravaged or whatever, right? I want to really feel wanted and physically wanted, right? Some women have more porn star than president and partner, or president and princess. Some more princess, all that stuff, right? But we all have different polarities. Our job as men is to figure out what the balance is. Men, our three polarities are man, boy, teen. Okay, and by man I mean I want to be in charge. I want to be the man, right? I want to be the guy, right? By teen, I want to be just do what I want. I want to have fun. I want to go drinking. I want to have a lot of sex, all that stuff. That's teen. And then boy, I want to be mothered. I want to be taken care of. I really want to be cared for. Okay. Every man, we have different levels of that. Some of us we have a higher percentage need for man, less boy, more teen, whatever, right? And I think what Kristen and I talk about all the time is one of the things we have to do is understand that about our partner, and hopefully our polarities are compatible to a certain degree, right? Because if they are, then you start to really get into a rhythm. But even if they're not as compatible, understanding that and understanding what your partner needs and their needs is an important thing. And the hope is that in fulfilling your partner's needs, it's actually fulfilling your needs as well. So anyway, that's kind of a bullshit
I love
theory.
it. At least respected too, awareness and respect about where someone else fits in and all of that.
Yeah.
And what about the two of you in terms of what do you focus on to make sure, or not, obviously there's a lot of things that happen in life. There's only so much that you can do, but in terms of making sure your kids are successful and confident and kind, happy, productive people when they're older.
Yeah, I think it's building an environment of love and safety and trust. That's the number one thing. Life is going to throw enough crap at kids. It did when we were kids. That you don't have to be the one who throws crap at your kids. Give them an environment of safety, love, and trust where they know they have someplace to go. They have someplace they can talk. I have two boys, and they talk to their mom so in depth. It's just wonderful. They're really best friends with their mother, and they talk to me as well. That they feel safe to do that. I think that type of safety promotes a level of confidence and security that allows kids to go out. I think the other thing is we have to throw as much in front of their windshield as we possibly can. Give them experiences. Allow them to try stuff. Hopefully teach them that winning is not the goal. It's working hard. It's the effort that is rewarded, not the winning. Winning's fine, and there's nothing wrong with winning. But I always kind of say that the best winners, and the most effective, most successful winners are the people who know how to lose well, because that loss is coming. You know what to get for. You know that loss can equal growth, and I think helping them understand that is also really important. So yeah, again, do we get it right? No, we get a lot of things wrong. We make a lot of mistakes, but we do the best we can. We try to model it. So
yeah, you and me both. And in fact, I've sort of evolving definition of how to win the day. What I have at the moment, which I think will stick, is that I define winning the day as total output in the areas that matter most to you.
Yeah,
that's it. I feel like if you just if every morning you can just focus on that as a commitment for the day. Just what are the areas that matter most to me right now, and what are some actions that I can take to keep the output high on that day?
Yeah, I think that's great because that lends itself to appropriate horizon shifting. You pick the horizons that are most appropriate. It's not everything. It's the horizons that are most appropriate in that moment. And even when the day means that in this moment, in this particular moment, the thing I'm going to focus on is getting my kids ready and sending off to school in a great way. Okay, that's what I'm focused on. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm going to focus on that. And once that's complete, I'll focus on the next thing. And so I think it's a wonderful, I've always loved, I've been a fan of Win the Day for ages now. And I think it's because it's such a real life philosophy, because it means I'm just going to do the best I can in the moment. It's optimal performance, really.
Yeah. 9 letters, it means so much.
Yes. Yeah.
You see your two boys, if they go down the path of wanting to be Navy SEALs, do you encourage them or discourage them?
Well, I would always encourage them, but they're 20 and 18, and neither of them want to join the military. So in fact, my eldest he's just getting ready to go to UVA for neuroscience. He wants to be a neuroscientist.
Awesome.
So I couldn't be prouder of that. My 18-year-old wants to be an engineer, so he loves rockets and math and space. So yeah, I love it. It would give Kristen an aneurysm, and I have to admit I would worry too. But if they wanted to, sure, you're gonna encourage them to, just like my dad did, and support them, in that way. But yeah, they want to go different directions. So yeah.
Well, let's now move to the Win the Day Rocket Round, and
Okay.
10 questions for some quick answers. I've shifted this up, so we got 10 new questions just for you because you've already answered them before.
Yes.
Number 1, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received, probably beware the fearless leader. That was one of the
So
best. Yeah, that'd probably be one of the best. There's probably several, but this is quick, so I'm just going to
Number 2, what time of day do you do your most creative work?
morning. Yeah, morning is typically, and honestly, usually when I'm moving, like I go for runs in the woods, that's my brain is spinning in a very creative way. So yeah.
Awesome. Number 3, you're about to spend a week on a desert island. What's the first thing you're packing?
A week on a desert island. What's the first thing I'm packing? Toothbrush.
I guess anything could happen on the desert island.
I guess I've fasted. I can go a week without food. I guess maybe water. I guess if resources, but I'm assuming that there's water there. Yeah.
You'd be able to track it down.
So
Number 4, what's the biggest fear you have at this stage of your life?
wow, biggest fear. Biggest fear would be that I do not live up to what I want to be for my family and my friends and the people I care about. And so everything I do every day is in the context of making sure I live up to what I want to be for them, which is a support, a rock, a foundation, something from which they can count upon, something that can allow them to explore their own goals and endeavors.
Number 5, what's your best piece of marriage advice?
Listen, shut up and listen.
Good advice for all the men out there. Stop trying to solve the problem. Shut up and listen.
It's not about the nail. You remember that YouTube video? Yeah. So, yeah.
Number 6, what's the scariest thing about the ocean?
Scariest thing about the ocean is the depth and the pressure and the cold. I love being underwater, but thinking about being at these massive depths where it's like super pressurized and it's cold and it's dark, that would be, that would be tough.
Number 7, what SEAL lesson do you practice most in civilian life?
Work the problem. Yeah. Whatever it is, just work the problem. Don't dwell.
Number 8, who inspires you the most?
So many so many sources of inspiration. I try to gain inspiration from everybody. My wife inspires me. My kids inspire me. My siblings inspire me. You inspire me. I think anytime I see people who are actively pursuing their goals and they're working through it, that inspires me. Yeah.
Number 9, what decision has had the biggest impact on your career to date?
To not quit SEAL training. Yeah. So real quick, I got to go to my centennial class, BUDS class, which is, I went through 210. I went to see 310's Hell Week, and they asked me to secure the Hell Week, which is a big deal. And I remember the guys were standing there, and I told them, I said, listen, you just finished. I started with this. I said, listen, I've been, it was 18 years or something. I've been in the teams 18 years. I've gone around the world. I fought and served with some of the most phenomenal people. I met one of my dreams. I have 2 awesome kids. I have this great life. And it's all because I did not say the same 2 words you did not say, which is I quit. Had I said those words, my entire life would be different. And so yeah, best decision was to not say those words.
Incredible. And final question, number 10, what do you want your kids to remember about you?
I want them to remember me as supportive and strong and a foundation, someone who they and family could count upon. Yeah, to help them live a good life. Yeah.
Love it. And in fact, before we finish, is there anything you want to share about the work you're doing with the attributes today and where people can go for more information?
Yeah, theattributes.com, still the website. We have this great assessment now for all 41 attributes. You can take the assessment, see where you stand on that, so you can check that out. We have workshops centered around attributes, trust, and uncertainty. Both books are on that website. So yeah, theattributes.com. Go check it out. And of course, I'm on Instagram. Follow me there, and also LinkedIn. So
yeah, Rich is doing incredible. Rich and his team are doing incredible work all over the world. So make sure you check him out. As you've heard here on the Win the Day podcast 2 times now, Rich is an absolute master at his craft. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Rich, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at Rich_Diviney. Visit his website, theattributes.com, and grab a copy of his new book, Masters of Uncertainty, on Amazon. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Rich, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, brother. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.